interested to know that the African Commission has interpreted the right to food in the case which was handled by the Commission, which is Serac and CESR versus Nigeria, in which case it was held that this is inherent, the right to life, the right to health, and the right to economic, social, and cultural development under the African Charter. So far as the AU theme is concerned, you may be interested to know that the theme is actually premised on the following facts, which is number one, human capital, especially a well-nourished, healthy women, children, and youth population, is key for development as it leads to improved lives for individuals, higher earnings, and improved incomes for countries. Estimated with a population of 1.225 billion, that was as at 2015, is the fastest urbanizing continent. Growth rate of more than 2.6%. In this regard, of course, the numbers will increase from 1.25 which I talked about, and as it is right now. And we also have a large population of youth, which presents evidence that if right investment contributes to accelerating sustainable development. Number three, malnutrition in all its forms hampers the development of individuals, communities, and nations across Africa and worldwide. It's one of the worst killers of children in Africa. Lastly, but not least, although child mortality remains a big challenge, distinguished delegate, years deep. Rights to food, building resilience, nutrition across Africa. This 74th session was held on the 12th of February to 9th of March. From what I've said, the theme of AU and indeed the number of solutions which the African Commission has passed really show that Africa is determined to eradicate poverty and build shared prosperity through healthy, inclusive, sustainable, and environmentally climatic sensitive food systems, sanitation and sanitation systems, inclusive of drinking water supplies, effective social protection systems, ensuring that no one is left behind, including the poorest and the most nutritionally vulnerable, and investment in nutrition and education for all. As far as I'm concerned, I think at the end of the day, the objectives of this panel are going to be met, what with the experts that we have, and I'm sure the experts that we have are in a position to deliver the right messages which will make this panel, which I can predict right from the beginning, is bound to be a success. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, commissaire Mandenga. Ceci dit, nous allons maintenant passer la parole à Madame Ahmed Ba, directeur exécutif de l'Agence nationale de la nutrition ici en Gambie, qui nous entretiendra sur les stratégies nationales et approches multisectorielles pour le règlement du problème de la malnutrition sous toutes ses formes. À monsieur plutôt Ahmed Ba, m'excuse, mais pour cela vous avez 10 minutes. 10 minutes, veuillez consulter votre montre et ne pas dépasser le temps si possible. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't take any offense with the madam. I'm a ladies' man, so I will not take offense. I wish to welcome all the delegates to the Gambia, our smiling coast, and hope that you are enjoying the smiling coast with some of our delicious food, especially considering we are on a panel discussion dealing with nutrition. So I hope you have enjoyed our benachins, for most of you the jollof rice, and also our domoda. This is the groundnut stew, only found in the Gambia. So welcome to the Gambia. Mr. Chair, I am delighted to be asked by the Commission to come and speak in this panel simply because when this AU theme on nutrition was being adopted in Addis Ababa in February 2002, I was in the chamber myself as part of the Gambian delegation. So it is an honor to be called here to come and speak on the theme in my home country. Let me throw a few things on nutrition before I deal with what was assigned to me. Why nutrition? Nutrition is life. Nutrition is survival. Nutrition is a basic need for every human being. And I'm sure that's why the Commissioner mentioned human capital development. Without nutrition, there won't be an effective, efficient human capital for a country. Good nutrition is a key to reducing inequality and eliminating poverty. Good nutrition lies at the heart of economic and social development. Food and nutrition is culture. Remember, we are what we eat. Therefore, nutrition is a fundamental human right for all. And here we are talking about human rights. You cannot have a better human right than adequate nutrition. To achieve this right for all, there must be nutrition security for all. One cannot achieve nutrition security if the full roles and potentials of multiple sectors and stakeholders are not realized. And key among these sectors or stakeholders is agriculture for sustainable production of nutritious and healthy food. Is healthcare, and this will include the control and eradication of diseases. Education for the population. I can tell you that in the Gambia, after we did the AU-supported, sanctioned COHA study, Cost of Hunger in Africa, we realized that the Gambia is losing 5.1% of its GDP due to undernutrition. That's a huge amount that we are losing because of undernutrition. And I'm sure similar trends are also happening in other countries of the Africa region. Care for the vulnerable and the deprived. Sustainable maintenance of the environment, including climate change mitigation, which I'm sure other panelists will touch about. Empowerment of communities. Without the communities being empowered, you cannot have nutrition security. Economic empowerment. We all know in the nutrition sphere that the underlying cause of malnutrition is poverty. And as Africans, we just have to be serious with poverty and get our people out of poverty if we are to be serious to make sure that they have nutrition security. We cannot have a population with 50% poverty and expect that we will develop our human capital. How did we do what we are doing in the Gambia? The Gambia is being recognized in the African continent as a country, touch wood, that's making some progress. And we ourselves have recognized this progress. And how did we do it? The single most important act we did as a nation was to develop an all-inclusive national nutrition policy with a multi-sectoral costed strategic plan accompanied by a nutrition business plan for resource mobilization to be able to invest in nutrition. What is in this all-inclusive national nutrition policy? The national nutrition policy has themes that range from maternal nutrition, infant and young child nutrition, food and nutrition security at the community and household levels, micronutrient deficiency control, food quality and safety, to nutrition in emergencies and nutrition surveillance. And we made sure that this policy is implemented through community nutrition programs, social and behavioral change communication, mainstreaming nutrition into sector policies, legislation, strategies, and programs, and have a structured policy implementation framework where we have, even at the apex, a National Nutrition Council of Ministers of different ministries, and also an agency that is responsible for coordinating and implementing proven nutrition interventions. Also have an effective monitoring and evaluation, nutrition research, and nutrition resource mobilization. Let me step back a little bit. The bedrock to the approach in the Gambia was breastfeeding. This may sound humble, but it was the humble beginning that enabled the National Nutrition Agency to achieve its nutrition objectives using the life cycle approach, where you have the mother, you have the baby, you have the child, the adolescent, you have the mother-to-be, you have the pregnant mother, and you have the baby again. Because without the life cycle approach, it's difficult to also have nutrition security for all. Where are we today? In the Gambia, we believe we are on the right trajectory with regards to some very important nutrition indicators. Stunting is a nutrition indicator where the child is not growing according to his or her height. We are at 17 or 14%, depending on which report you are looking at. But in the last 5 years, we have reduced stunting from 25 to these figures, 17, 14, depending on the report. Now, stunting is one of the most difficult nutrition indicators to reduce, but the Gambia is making progress. Wasting, we are at 5%, and this is around the World Health Assembly target of 5%. So we're at 5.1%. Underweight at 11%. Anemia in women and children is is actually the biggest nutritional deficiencies. And where were we? About 70%. Today our figures are showing that we are about 40%. These are progresses that we have made. Exclusive breastfeeding, above the sub-Saharan average. Salt iodization, for the intelligence of our children. For pregnancy, we are at 78%, aiming to get 90% of all households. We could not have been where we are if not of the concerted effort of all partners and stakeholders in nutrition. 10 minutes here is too short to name all of them, but they are all in the Gambia helping. One of them actually is one of the panelists we have here, Madam Rampedi from FAO. We have made a lot of gains, but these gains are fragile. They are fragile because there are issues that can come up that can wipe out all the gains that we have. COVID-19 is one of them. Climatic change, droughts, etc. is one of them. Every year in the Gambia, we are hoping we have good rains. If in case we don't, the nutrition work that we have done can become a headache for us. The food crisis, the fuel crisis, the war in Russia and Ukraine are all issues that are affecting or could affect these gains that we have. Let me conclude, Mr. Chair, by saying that to be able to have success in the African continent and in our individual countries, we need to have a vision and a goal for nutrition that is translated into a costed strategic plan that has a legal backing. We need to consistently invest in nutrition, which means we have to be steadfast in resource mobilization for nutrition. Otherwise, it will be declaration upon declaration upon declaration, and we don't make the necessary progress. We need to build capacity of those who are expected to implement nutrition objectives. Thank you. We need to harness the partnership. Let me lastly say that in nutrition, we know what works. What we need is investment and scaling up the proven interventions to reach all. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Nous voulons rappeler encore l'intérêt de respecter le temps. C'est dans notre intérêt à passons, ça n'ira pas. Je vais passer la parole à Madame Moshiboudi Rampeli, qui va nous entretenir sur la nutrition et la sécurité alimentaire, initiatives et investissements mondiaux pour l'amélioration de la nutrition et de la santé. Je rappelle encore que c'est pour 10 minutes suivant la note conceptuelle de ce panel. Merci beaucoup. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner Lumbu. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, fellow panelists, it is a privilege to be invited to this panel on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. I will be addressing nutrition and food security, global initiatives and investments in boosting nutrition and health. Distinguished delegates, commissioners, FAO joins the African Union in recognizing the 2022 AU Theme of the Year, Year of Nutrition, Strengthening Resilience in Nutrition and Food Security on the African continent. The most recent edition of the State of Food Insecurity and Nutrition in the World, called SOFI, revealed a worrying and humbling reality. Africa's share of the malnourished remains a concern, compromising productivity, economic and social development. 6 years ago, the world committed to the goal of ending hunger, food insecurity, and all forms of malnutrition by 2030. There was a commitment to adopt transformative approaches, accelerating and scaling up interventions towards ensuring access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food for all people all year round. And as the United Nations, this noble commitment or intention is captured in the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. The SDG 2, part of the commitment was for us to work together to eradicate all forms of malnutrition. However, distinguished delegates, as we are sitting here today, conflict, climate variability and extremes, and economic slowdowns and downturns are slowing down progress, particularly where inequality is high. The COVID-19 pandemic made the pathway towards SDG 2 even steeper. FAO's message is that we need bold actions. Around the world, 660 million people may still face hunger in 2030, in part due to lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on global food insecurity. If we do not take bold actions, we might get to 2030 and find that even 30 more people are in desperate need. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to make bold actions. Responsible investments are critical to build resilience in food systems, to mitigate drivers of food insecurity and malnutrition, as well as inequalities affecting the access to food. FAO recommends 6 pathways to follow towards food systems transformation. The recommendations are in addressing nutrition and food security and asking us what can we do together globally to boost nutrition and health. The recommendations coming from FAO are as follows. Member states should integrate humanitarian, development and peace-building policies in conflict-affected areas. If we bring to communities only humanitarian assistance and we don't strengthen peace-building, we are not going to win. We are recommending as FAO that member states should invest in climate resilience across food systems, strengthen resilience of the most vulnerable to economic adversity, intervene along the food supply chains to lower the cost of nutritious food. Member states can tackle poverty and structural inequality by ensuring that their interventions are pro-poor and inclusive. Member states can do more by strengthening food environments and changing consumer behavior to promote dietary patterns with positive impact on human health and the environment. Pathways. FAO governance mechanisms cannot happen unless member states show a full commitment. I wish to conclude, Chairperson, of this session by thanking the African Union for inviting FAO to participate in this panel discussion. Our message to the delegates, to excellencies, is as follows. We are ending with a message that says transformed food systems can become a driving force towards ending hunger. Transformed food systems can assist to address food insecurity and malnutrition in all its forms. Climate smart and environmentally sound food production, the conservation and rehabilitation of natural environments will strengthen the resilience of food systems against increased climate variability and extremes. Food supply chains and social protection programs must be kept operational to aid recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, conflict as well as economic slowdowns and downturns. Our message to this session and to my co-panelists is that humanitarian assistance must protect lives and livelihoods, long-term development, and sustain peace. Food and nutrition security governance mechanisms and policies must be coherent, they must be inclusive, they must be comprehensive, and they have to shift agri-food investment choices. Governments have to make better choices, make sure there is consumer education in order to change dietary patterns for the benefit of human health and the environment. As I thank you for your attention, I wish to re-emphasize that it is important to integrate humanitarian assistance with development and peace-building initiatives. I thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame le directeur exécutif. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à Madame Meskerem Gesset Tektan, qui va parler de l'impact du commerce et du changement climatique sur la sécurité alimentaire en Afrique. Pour 10 minutes, vous avez la parole, Madame.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I will be speaking on the impact of trade and climate change on the right to food, or food security in Africa. Starting from the basic, as we have heard, access to food or the right to food is a fundamental human right, which is recognized in several international and regional human rights instruments. In particular, the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights elaborated the right to adequate food is realized when everyone, individually or collectively, has physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or means of its procurement. As we noted, available data tells us that Africa is faced with a severe threat of hunger and famine in most food insecure areas due to limited or lack of access to food. This means hunger and famine for tens of millions of people who are on the verge of becoming or are already food insecure. Global projections suggest that by 2025, more than 60% of the global population that is at risk of hunger will be in Sub-Saharan Africa. Evidence also shows Sub-Saharan Africa to be the region most affected by climate change, with severe impact on food security. Evidence also suggests that the Middle East and North Africa region to be the second most affected, which also has part of Africa as well. Coming to trade and climate change, there are two interactive factors that impact the right to food or food security in Africa. The vital and interdependent link between climate change and food security manifests in two ways. Climate change has negative impacts on agriculture and food production. And on the other hand, existing agricultural practices and food systems are also responsible for harming the environment, accelerating human-induced climate change. As the work of the UN special procedures and also that of mainly the special rapporteur on the right to food shows, climate change poses unique and distinct threats to all aspects of food security, including availability, accessibility, adequacy, and sustainability. This is already having a significant impact on approximately 1 billion of the world's poor, most of which is in Africa. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has expressed concern that climate change is likely to have an overall negative effect on production of major cereal crops across Africa. This has detrimental impact on the right to food of many Africans and disproportionate effect on certain groups and individuals, for example, subsistence farmers, women farmers and traders, female-headed households, rural population, indigenous groups, small-scale farmers, and etc. The manifestations of climate change, such as an increase of extreme weather, global warming, a rise in the sea levels, and increase in water scarcity, have significant impacts on food security. The challenges associated with these climate risks, such as crop failures, adverse impact on livestock, fisheries, agriculture, food price volatility, nutritional deficiencies, diminishing quality of land, and degradation of soil for food production will have an overall negative effect on people's livelihood. Ensuring sustainable livelihood is a crucial aspect of food security, and it is one that is threatened by climate change. Agriculture plays a dual role in relation to food security, which is not only production of food that people eat, but also it provides the primary source of employment for vast majority. In Sub-Saharan Africa, 2/3 of the working population, majority of which women, is employed in agricultural labor. Thus, if agriculture production is adversely affected by climate change, so too are the livelihoods of significant numbers of rural workers, again, the majority of women. The impacts of climate change are also differently felt by different groups: small-scale farmers, indigenous people, women who depend on climate-sensitive natural systems for their food and livelihoods are particularly susceptible to the effects of climate change and on their food security. On the other hand, climate change mitigation and adaptation measures may also be problematic when they rely on resources that are currently devoted to food production. This may have negative impact as it involves reallocation of some resources at the expense of food security. Some of the examples include agriculture for biofuel production, water diversion for climate-friendly energy production. Moving to the vital link between trade and human rights, and in particular the right to food. Human rights in general and trade are interrelated, as trade offers opportunities for increasing people's enjoyment of human rights, including the right to food. On the other hand, human rights can also ensure that trade leads to sustainable and inclusive development. Studies indicate various possibilities by which trade can improve the physical or economic access to food, directly or indirectly. For example, trade policies can improve wages and employment, access to market, and access to new technologies, which offer the means for accessing food. On the more direct aspect, the beneficial effects of trade on the food situation is most visible in terms of availability, and also it leads to lower prices. Trade is expected to provide a pull factor in addressing shortfalls from agriculture production, as it offers considerable opportunities in moving goods like food from surplus to deficit areas. It may also provide cheaper food, for at the same time it allows countries to benefit from agricultural exports. However, the regulation or liberalization of trade may have negative impact on environmental protection. Unregulated and loosely regulated businesses and investments in some sectors, as we have seen from some of our country visits and thematic reports of the UN special procedures, such as in agriculture, tourism, extractive industries, may contribute to environmental degradation and climate change that may also have impacts on food security. In some cases, the adverse terms of trade appear to wipe off the positive effects of trade and lead to food insecurity. Tariff liberalization processes may pose threat to food security if implemented without appropriate safeguards. Trade that solely focused on economic growth may create pressure on rural farmers to produce export crops or adversely impact on the livelihoods of vulnerable populations who trade at smaller scale or in informal systems. As indicated by UN experts, export restrictions on essential foodstuffs, negative trade practices like hoarding, stocking of basic foodstuffs, adversely affect the enjoyment of the right to food and erodes efforts to achieve food security for all. Trade can improve food security in African region and support agricultural development among small-scale farmers. But an excessive exposure to global markets may also increase risks. The positive role of trade can only be ensured with the rules that recognize the right to food. As emphasized by the Special Rapporteur on the right to food, states need to advance trade policy from a right to food perspective. Also, barriers to trade can pose a great danger to food security in the region, impeding the benefits of trade for access to food. An outbreak of protectionism, such as tariff barriers affecting the key food commodities or fertilizers, could lead to price shocks, ecological damage, the undermining of food security for some of the most vulnerable populations. In this context, the African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to ease most of the challenges in trade barriers. It is believed it may ease the various challenges that frustrate, delay, or outrightly impede the exchange of food across borders of African states. From political and other administrative constraints, tariff-related or non-tariff barriers, from border closure to cost of transportation, mobility challenge, and all that is expected to be eased by the Continental Free Trade Area arrangement. Going to the figures, informal and cross-border trade accounts for 70% of economy in the sub-Saharan Africa and is also a source of income for 43% of African population. Women in Africa constitute 70% of this informal cross-border trade, and low-income women traders across borders throughout Africa every day make a major economic contribution to the continent by playing greater role in food supply, bringing basic food products from areas where they are relatively cheaper. In order to Thank you. In order to ensure the benefits of trade arrangements and also some of the measures taken to address climate change, what needs to be done is first a human rights impact assessment is important, which helps to identify, analyze, and monitor the impact of policy measures. Human rights impact assessment that also needs to be based on a human rights-based, that also needs to provide a human rights-based approach to climate change, climate mitigation and adaptation policies is very important. In doing so also, ensuring a gender intersectional lens is applied is also important in order to address diverse effects of policy measures on different groups of population, including women and other. The need to address the effects of trade and investment measure into climate change on diverse populations through disaggregated data is also a very key step that states are expected to take. In all this, participation is key. Participation in policy making, whether climate change adaptation or mitigation policy, whether trade policy needs to be based on participation and broad consultation of stakeholders. That also needs to respond the diverse needs and challenges of diverse groups of people who are involved and mostly affected by these measures. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Mesquerem. Et en résumé, les trois intervenants ont pu montrer que face à la question de la sécurité alimentaire, il peut y avoir des stratégies nationales et des approches multisectorielles comme la Gambie nous l'a montré. Et si le commerce et le changement climatique impactent sur la sécurité alimentaire, on ne peut pas avoir peur parce que des institutions comme la FAO disposent des initiatives et des investissements mondiaux pour l'amélioration de la nutrition et de la santé à travers le monde. Je remercie tous les orateurs pour la qualité de leur exposé et surtout pour les éléments pertinents qu'ils ont mis à la disposition du public. Ceci nous conduit donc à la partie des séances questions et réponses qui prendra 20 minutes maximum. On va tâcher à ce que cela soit respecté. Sur ma liste, on doit se partager les 20 minutes pour tout ce qui doit être fait, en ce compris les éléments de la fin. Les échanges interactifs, c'est 20 minutes, et puis les observations finales, c'est 5 minutes, selon le programme qui m'a été communiqué par le secrétariat et que je tâche de suivre scrupuleusement. Parmi les intervenants, nous avons M. Ouedraogo Adama, du ministère de la Justice et des Droits humains, chargé des relations avec les institutions de l'État du Cameroun. Je rappelle que nous n'avons que 20 minutes. Et après 20 minutes, nous passerons à autre chose. Est-ce que M. Ouedraogo Adama, il est là? J'indique également qu'à midi 15, nous allons légèrement suspendre le panel pour permettre à la délégation de la République du ministre de Tanzanie de faire sa déclaration et de devoir partir parce qu'il doit reprendre l'avion. On a des contraintes. Et puis nous reviendrons dans le panel. Ça sera juste une courte interruption s'il est là. Je lui demanderai déjà à son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de Tanzanie, d'être prêt quand je lui donnerai la parole. Monsieur Ouedraogo Adama.
Monsieur le Président, je suis bien Ouedraogo Adama du Burkina Faso, mais...
Chez moi, c'est écrit State of Cameroon. Si, c'est
pas moi.
Une bonne chose. Je vois que l'Angola demande la parole. C'est une motion? Alors, je donne d'abord la parole à l'Angola pour la motion, et puis je vais revenir à l'État du Cameroun.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente, distintos comissários, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. Angola também gostaria de fazer pequenas contribuições neste importante painel sobre nutrição. Ouvimos atentamente os peritos e os preletores e Angola está de acordo com algumas ações que cá foram levantadas, como é a proatividade dos Estados para o combate à nutrição, o reforço da capacidade institucional, um plano bom de orçamentação, uma assistência alimentar e redução de taxas aduaneiras para certos produtos. Como referimos na nossa intervenção de Estado, por Sua Excelência a Secretária de Estado, que é a nossa representante, Angola está fortemente comprometida e alinhada com o lema da União Africana para o plano de 2022, que consiste em construir uma resiliência na nutrição no continente africano para acelerar o capital humano e o desenvolvimento social e econômico. O estado de nutrição dos angolanos é uma preocupação do executivo angolano, que tem 38% de crianças que evidenciam malnutrição e 15% evidencia malnutrição crônica. Estes são os dados do Instituto Nacional de Estatística de 2016. Gostaria aqui de referir que, nos últimos anos, Angola tem registrado grandes avanços com os compromissos de erradicar a fome. Cerca de 32,3% da população vive abaixo da linha de pobreza, sendo que as áreas rurais são mais afetadas. Para o biênio 2004 e 2017 e 2019, a prevalência da subnutrição, ou seja, a incapacidade de adquirir alimentos suficientes com nível de ingestão alimentar, foi de 52%, que foi reduzida para 19%. Esta redução foi fruto de diferentes programas transversais nas áreas de ação social, educação, saúde e outros implementados no período de 2018-2022, na qual foi gizado um programa de melhoria da saúde materno-infantil e nutrição no âmbito do Plano de Desenvolvimento Nacional, que visou responder uma série de desafios. Em relação à alimentação e à malnutrição, o país tem registrado diversos avanços, com alguns bons indicadores a nível da saúde. A insegurança alimentar severa afeta quase 2 milhões de agregados familiares, segundo também o Instituto Nacional de Estatística, isto no período de 2019, sendo que as áreas rurais são mais afetadas, bem como os agregados familiares chefiados por mulheres. Existem no país um total de 592 unidades para atendimento de desnutrição, concentradas sobretudo nas províncias a sul do país, dos quais 80% são de tratamento ambulatório e 20% para o internamento de crianças com malnutrição severa. Apesar de taxas de incidência da malnutrição ter se registrado no período de 2018 para 2019, o país continua a gizar certas medidas, como o aleitamento materno tem contribuído para uma redução de cerca de 25% da mortalidade infantil. Por este facto, o Governo tem orientado e sensibilizado as mães a amamentarem exclusivamente até aos 6 meses e com uma continuação que pode chegar até os 23 meses. Sr. Presidente, a seca e os seus efeitos secundários têm impacto sobre o estado nutricional da população, provocando um aumento dos casos de desnutrição infantil. Programas de resiliência de segurança alimentar têm reforçado a capacidade não só do Ministério da Saúde, mas do Ministério da Agricultura e das Pescas também. Os indicadores mostram que Angola tem um vasto número de desafios para combater a nutrição. Para terminar, já gostaria de referir que o novo Plano de Desenvolvimento Nacional 2023-2027 tem o foco virado para o desenvolvimento do capital humano. O Executivo tem continuado a dedicar toda a sua atenção para estes planos. Gostaria também de dizer que Angola trabalha com as organizações internacionais, que é o caso da FAO e da UNICEF, para comatar muitos desideratos que têm surgido. Muito obrigado.
Nous remercions la délégation de l'Angola, mais il ne s'agissait pas d'une motion comme je le pensais. Il s'agit plutôt d'une déclaration que vous faites en réaction par rapport au panel. Je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour indiquer que lorsqu'un État souhaite intervenir par rapport à un panel, la procédure demande que vous vous inscriviez simplement et nous allons vous accorder la parole. Parce que tout à l'heure, quand je vous ai accordé la parole, je pensais qu'il s'agissait d'une motion d'ordre ou toute autre motion, mais vous étiez en train de réagir par rapport au panel. Je félicite tout de même, malgré tout ça, la République d'Angola pour toutes ses réalisations dans le domaine de la sécurité alimentaire, notamment les programmes de résilience avec des indicateurs objectivement observables que vous avez bien voulu partager avec nous. Je reviens à ce que je disais tout à l'heure. J'invite M. Ouedraogo Adama. C'était écrit State of Cameroon, mais je crois que c'était une erreur. Est-ce que M. Ouedraogo est là? C'est Burkina Faso. Vous allez prendre la parole, je corrige sur mes papiers qu'il ne s'agisse pas du Cameroun, mais du Burkina. Vous pouvez prendre la parole, je rappelle que dans le cadre des échanges, il nous reste 15 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mais veuillez noter que notre intervention est sans objet.
Merci, l'intervention est maintenant sans objet. Merci beaucoup. Je passe la parole au Dr Tambo Ernest de African Union Organ, Africa Intelligence, Preparedness and Response, Yaoundé, selon ce que je vois ici. Est-ce que M. Tambo Ernest est là? Est-ce qu'il est là? Je ne vois pas M. Tambo Ernest. Je rappelle que pour les ONG ou les personnes qui sont dans la salle qui n'ont pas de micro, le pupitre qui est au milieu de la salle, est bien réservé à ceux qui n'ont pas de micro devant eux. M. Tambo Ernest, est-ce qu'il est là? Il n'est pas là. On va passer au dernier intervenant qui s'est enregistré. C'est Thomas Fouad Touré, qui est le directeur exécutif de West African Institute for Legal Aid, WAILA. De West African Institute for Legal Aid, WAILA. Est-ce que M. Thomas Fouad est là? Il s'est inscrit pour prendre la parole pour ce forum. Je ne vois pas M. Fouad. Dans l'intérêt du temps, je pense que nous pouvons passer. Ceci dit, chers panélistes, je voudrais, après ces échanges interactifs qui finalement n'ont pu être exercés que par la République d'Angola, je vais passer la parole pour les observations finales à tous les panélistes. Et enfin, je passerai la parole au commissaire Mwandenga qui va conclure à la fin de tout ceci et nous indiquer quelles sont les pistes d'avenir. Je commencerai par M. Ahmed Ba pour vos observations finales en 2 minutes, si possible. M. Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This time around, I'm not going to flout your rules. I'll do it in less than 2 minutes. I thank you very much for really having me here, like I have said. Before, this is something we are passionate about. Some of us have spent over 30 years working in this area, and we are beginning to see it bearing fruit. If the AU and the Commission are discussing nutrition, this is an achievement for all those who are working in nutrition in the continent. And we hope that it is going to be something that's going to help us build the necessary human capital that we yearn for. My final 2 points will be that as a continent, we have to be serious with poverty. Without eradicating poverty, we are not going to make the progress that we want to make. And as it stands now, all indications are that close to half of our population is living below the poverty line. This, as far as nutrition is concerned, is not encouraging. As a continent, we have to be serious with alleviating poverty. Lastly, I want to implore all countries in the continent to look at having an all-inclusive nutrition policy and a costed strategic plan so that investment in nutrition can be easier. It's not easy, resources are not available, but at least if you have a costed, a policy, a vision, a focus, and a costed strategic plan, then it is much easier to mobilize the resources required for the human capital development for nutrition in the continent. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais passer la parole à Madame Moshiboudi Rompedi pour ses observations finales. Madame, vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Program Director, distinguished delegates. My concluding remarks would be that access to food, adequate food, is a human right, and this is fully covered by the voluntary guidelines that FAO has put in place and developed many years ago with member states. I would encourage that member states invest in transforming food systems, because if we carry on with business as usual, it means we will not achieve the targets that we have set ourselves for 2030, for Agenda 2030. It is important to produce food, but in a climate smart way, because if we do not do that, it also implies that we will again fail to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Finally, Mr. Chairperson, for the sake of members of our communities and populations that are vulnerable, we have to make sure that food supply chains and social protection programs remain functional in order for us to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, notwithstanding the fact that this of conflict. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Merci beaucoup. Nous allons maintenant passer la parole à la dernière intervenante, Madame Eskerem, pour les observations finales 2 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. My also call will be for member states and all stakeholders to adopt an inclusive and transformative climate change policy and trade policy that really is anchored on a human rights-based approach, based on, in particular, an analysis of the right to food for all, and with a special focus also the right to food of those people who are in vulnerable situation. As the special rapporteur on the right to food called a few years ago, made a call a few years ago to member states, trade policies need to be advanced from a right to food perspective, and also climate change policies, climate change mitigation and adaptation policies need to be transformed from a right to food perspective. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Skerem, pour vos observations finales. Je vais me tourner vers l'honorable commissaire Mwandenga.
Thank you, Chair. On my part, I wish to state that I think with the presentations which have been made by the panelists, it is my fervent hope that the main objective of the panel has been reached. And the main objective was essentially to raise awareness on the right to food and building resilience in the nutrition across Africa in a bid to achieve the goals of the theme of the year 2022 amongst state parties, NHRIs, international civil society organizations, NGOs, and any other interested parties, as well as the general public. But then, notwithstanding the general objective, I still believe that there were specific objectives which this panel was intended to achieve. One of them being that of raising awareness on nutrition and food security in Africa. Then there was also, I think from the speeches which the presenters made, was that was urging states to strengthen continental commitment and build resilience in nutrition and to end malnutrition in all its forms, and also to propose solutions to the current nutrition crisis on the continent and identify strategies to integrate nutrition in all relevant sectors. And lastly, but not the least, to promote increased production and processing of nutrient-rich African foods, crops. And ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, and distinguished participants, it is my hope that indeed the panel discussion which has been held has been successful. Thank you, Chair.
Non, je te remercie, commissaire Mwandenga. Je remercie aussi tous les panélistes, Monsieur Ahmed Ba, Madame Moshiboudi Rampedi, ainsi que Madame Eskerem Gesset. Je crois qu'ils méritent quand même un petit applaudissement pour les encourager pour ce premier panel. Merci beaucoup. Je reviens au point sur la situation des droits de l'homme sur le continent. Son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de la Justice de Tanzanie s'est inscrit. Il s'agit de l'honorable Geoffrey Privatus Mizengo Pinda. Est-ce que le ministre de Tanzanie est dans la salle? Son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de la Tanzanie, est-il dans la salle? Excellence, Monsieur le ministre, vous avez la parole pour faire la déclaration au titre du point 3 sur la situation des droits de l'homme en Afrique pour 7 minutes. Après, avant d'aller au panel, je vois que l'Afrique du Sud a redemandé la parole pour une motion d'ordre. Je vous passerai la parole et puis on passe au panel, au second panel. Excellence, vous avez la parole pour 7 minutes. Merci.
Mheshimiwa Mwenyekiti, waheshimiwa mawaziri mliopo, waheshimiwa makamishna, katibu mkuu mtendaji wa kamisheni, wawakilishi wa serikali, wawakilishi wa tume za haki za binadamu, wawakilishi wa asasi za kiraia, assalamu alaikum. Mheshimiwa Mwenyekiti, napenda kumshukuru sana Mwenyezi Mungu kwa kututunuku uhai, nasi tumekuwa sehemu ya ushiriki wa mkutano huu ambao pia unajumuisha matukio muhimu makubwa mawili. Moja ni maadhimisho ya miaka 35 ya kamisheni hii, lakini pili ni uzinduzi wa nembo ya kamisheni. Mheshimiwa Mwenyekiti, kwa heshima na unyenyekevu mkubwa, naomba kuwasilisha kwako Mheshimiwa Mwenyekiti salamu za dhati kutoka kwa Mheshimiwa Rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania Samia Suluhu Hassan, mpenda haki na usawa, anayesimamia kikamilifu utoaji wa haki.
Não há tradução em português, faz favor.
Okay. Kwa wananchi wote, anakipongeza chombo hiki kwa kazi nzuri inayofanywa ya kuratibu na kusimamia haki za binadamu na haki za watu chini ya Umoja wa Mataifa, chini ya Umoja wa Afrika. Kutokana na umuhimu wake, amenituma kwa niaba ya wananchi wa Tanzania kuwasilisha salamu hizi. Vile vile, kwa kuwa tunakutana kwa mara ya kwanza tangu janga la Uviko 19 kusambaa duniani, Kamisheni ya Afrika ya haki za binadamu na haki za watu inapongezwa kwa kuendelea na vikao vyake kwa njia ya mtandao na kuwezesha wananchi wa Afrika kuendelea kunufaika na huduma zake licha ya hali